Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Olatunji Taylor, and you can call me TJ. I'm the founder of Aricares Alliance, and I'm truly glad you're here with us today. Our webinar is titled Who Speaks for You? It's a family guide on understanding the power of attorney and fiduciary responsibility. This is such an important conversation because many families do not think about decision-making authority until there is a crisis, medical emergency, a sudden decline, confusion over finances, or a disagreement about who should step in. And when those moments happen without a plan, families can quickly find themselves overwhelmed, divided, fighting, and unsure of what to do next. So today's conversation is designed to make this topic practical, clear, and useful. We want families to walk away understanding key points: what power of attorney means, what fiduciary responsibility means, what can go wrong when no plan is in place. And this is going to be a conversational webinar. So please feel free to drop your questions into the chat as we go. I'm so happy. I'm joined by my co-host, Dan Williams. He's the owner of Elite Home Care. And we have special guests, Hilary Spahn. She's a professional fiduciary with Eterna. And of course, EJ Lewis is the executive director of Novellus Living Clairemont. So thank you all for coming in. And before I, continue, I would like you to introduce yourself. Let's start with Dan.
Sure. Dan Williams, Elite Home Care. We got into this industry based on my parents. So we didn't know, I didn't know what a fiduciary even was at the time. So it's nice to do that. Or I hadn't also been in any facilities. So to have these wonderful professionals beside us today, TJ, it's a pleasure to have. I mean, if you're new or if you're seeing your parents get old, which we all do, it's nice to have this in the pocket, back in your mind. So
Awesome. Thanks.
and TJ is very humble. Let me tell you about your co-person, to have him in range, because he's a CNA, so he came from medical side. But when we worked together, he was a caregiver with us. Everybody wanted him. Nobody wanted him to go. So it's nice to see that type of love, care, and professionalism all in one.
Thanks, Dan. Hilary, would you let
Yeah,
us know more about you?
so my name is Hilary Spahn. I am a California licensed professional fiduciary. I am the owner of Eterna Fiduciary, and I specialize in working with clients to provide trustee services, agent under power of attorney, and conservatorships for the estate and the person. And
Awesome.
then
Thanks.
also add that so I have been working in this field for about the past 15 years. I got my start working in an estate planning law firm where I worked as a paralegal, and I did that for 14 years. And I decided to make a transition over to being a fiduciary. I had worked with a lot of fiduciaries on the estate planning law office side, and so it was just a natural transition for me to make the move over to being a licensed professional fiduciary.
Right.
Oh, well done.
Wow.
Well done.
Love that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. EJ.
Yes. Hi. Hi, TJ. Yes. Good morning. Yes. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is EJ Lewis. I'm the executive director over Novellus Living. We're located in Claremont Mesa, California. My background, I'm a licensed social worker by trade. I have my both bachelor's and master's in social work. I've been in the industry for about, let's just say 10 years, varying from hospice social work, director of social services at skilled nursing, and also my current seat for senior living. I am also a California notary public, so we do a plethora of, let's just say, advanced directives, and I'm also DPOAs, HCPOAs. So we see them all the time, and I definitely am glad to be here today to just answer any questions about power of attorneys, and and just how we work with them in assisted living, and and how we honor the residents' rights and their wishes. So very glad to be here this morning. So
Thanks. Thank you. I think that already sets the tone for why this conversation matters. Families need clarity before crisis starts. So let's begin with the foundation. Many families Well, let me say many people have heard the term fiduciary, and I'm one of them, and the phrase power of attorney, but we don't know. We don't fully understand what it means in practical terms. So,
Mhm.
Hilary, would you explain fiduciary and power of attorney to someone hearing the term for the first time?
Yeah, okay. So let's start with fiduciary. So fiduciary is a very broad term. So there's a lot of individuals that have a fiduciary duty to their clients or other people. So for example, let's start with like a CPA. A CPA and a financial advisor for that matter, both have a fiduciary duty to their clients to report things, make sure that they're doing a good job, inform their clients if something is wrong. An
Mm,
attorney has a fiduciary duty if a family member is acting as a trustee or an agent under a power of attorney, that if an individual has a fiduciary duty to the client or the individual that they're representing. Now, in addition to that, in California, there is a professional fiduciary license. And so that is what I, as a fiduciary, have. And so what that license says is that I am qualified to serve as a trustee under a trust for someone, an agent under a power of attorney, a healthcare agent under a healthcare directive, or a conservator of a conservatorship of the estate or finances, or a conservator for healthcare decisions. And there's other roles that a fiduciary can fill, but those are the most basic roles that anyone would want to or need to be familiar with when he or she is thinking of a professional fiduciary.
uh, thanks.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so Dan, from the caregiving side, how does fiduciary or being having a power of attorney affect families when these roles are clearly set up ahead of time?
Well, I think it's clarity is probably the biggest one. If you have a fiduciary that you can ask questions to and get keep moving along until the full process is done, that's such an advantage and such a blessing, really. Because if not, then you're going to get opinions and you're going to get greed and you're going to have all kinds of different types of bombs that are going to come into the family. And it's clean. It's designed to be helpful and in those tough decisions.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
I would say to piggyback off of what Dan just said, that clarity is essential. So
Yeah.
if say you're working at a healthcare facility and you have a patient or a client who's been admitted and there's a child or a family member that is holding him or herself out to be that agent for the child, well, that person also needs to be able to have access to bank accounts, to funds, to
Correct.
pay bills, and to keep the process moving so that the client gets what he or she needs, the facility's being paid, and there's clear communication. Um, Family members are more than suitable to serve as agents, but sometimes things can get complicated and it can be overwhelming. Or to Dan's point, there could be greed. Like maybe I should be paying this amount of money for a client to be in a facility and get additional service like incontinence care. But I also see that if I'm a family member, I might potentially see that as a drain on the bank account and a drain on my inheritance. As a professional fiduciary, it's all about the client. And as long as the client has the funds and there's a budget, we can anticipate it meets the client's needs going forward. There's no reason for me to skip on essential needs for the client for my own benefit, because I'm here
mm,
to represent the client and advocate for the client.
Correct. And
oh,
TJ, I just want to add to that as well, too, just in
right.
relation to how we service with a power of attorney and a fiduciary. So let's just say in our setting for assisted living, we're non-medical, so we don't manage finance. So when we do have a resident that does have a fiduciary, they're able to request the invoice. They're able to pay the invoice. They're able to, request the account ledger, just to make sure that charges are being appropriately billed. Anything in relation to fiscal and financial, they can interact with the community on the behalf of the residents. So because that we're non-medical, we prefer that, let's just say, if someone does have like massive asset, or let's just say an account that they would prefer someone to manage and ensure that there's no break of service, we prefer that for fiduciary. Power of attorney, let's just say in our setting as well too, we do two styles, or we've seen two styles: healthcare power of attorney to manage someone's healthcare, and also a durable power of attorney that manages more of a financial concern. So it could be the same person, it could be, two different people. It's always just keen, just to make sure that the rights and the wishes of the residents are respected to whoever is granted or appointed as the agent, to ensure that their instructions are being followed. But We normally manage with those two, but they are very keen in having those in play, especially when you have families that have multiple children, as Hilary said, or multiple people that can contest, either things being done for the best interest of the resident. So it's always just good to have those people or those agents in place, or the fiduciary, to make the financial decisions for the resident. So.
All right, thanks, guys. So one key takeaway here for me is that power of attorney and fiduciary is not just paperwork. It has real life consequences for care, finances, communication, and peace of mind. So now I want to move into a very important part of this conversation, and this question is going to be to Hilary. Um, from the experience as a professional fiduciary, what actually happens when someone becomes incapacitated without any planning in place?
Well, it's pretty simple. So it
Yeah.
becomes a court matter. So
Mm,
that's when, if someone doesn't have any planning in place, or in some instances, a representative payee. For example, I could go to Social Security and add a friend or fiduciary as a representative payee, or like for the Veterans Affairs, a representative payee is an option. it,
mm,
that's a temporary workaround. If there's nothing in place, then this and the client does not have capacity, then it's going to turn into a conservatorship matter. And there's two types of conservatorships. There's conservatorship of the estate, which means over all of that individual's assets, home, bank accounts, retirement accounts. And then there's conservatorship of the person. The person has to do with healthcare decisions. Where's the client going to live? Who's going to care for the client? um, Food, exercise, personal relationships, everything for that matter. So simply, it just becomes a court matter, and it's public, and more people can be involved. So if you're in a conservatorship and you have children, your children are going to get a notice for everything that happens in that conservatorship. And it might be that your children even want to get an attorney to represent him or her. So it could be a simple conservatorship just to make sure bills are paid, or it could become a lot more complex depending upon involvement from other individuals.
all right, thanks. So before I allow Dan and EJ to respond to this, I want to ask you a follow-up question, right? Uh, so what kinds of problems or conflicts do you typically see families face when there isn't a clear decision maker regularly in place?
It's a difference of opinion that may have
Right.
to, it's a lot of things. I mean, first it could be, one child thinks that he or she knows his parent better. And so he says that, well, my dad wanted this, whereas another child said, no, this is what he wants. And I mean, children
Mm,
have different relationships with their parents depending upon their their birth. Were they the first? Were they the middle? Were they the last? It depends. Another thing would be a disagreement over finances. One child might be really responsible with money, the other one may not be responsible. And so it becomes like a tug of war with, are we spending for what's in the best interest of mom or dad, or are we spending in what's in the best interest for the kids who are hoping to inherit it? So it's
mm.
about control either way you look at it.
Okay, thanks for that. EJ, you want to
Yeah.
quickly react to that?
Absolutely, yes. So let's just say when it comes down to if it's too late or when it becomes too late, we hit that every day, or we hit that a lot in our setting as assisted living. So let's just say if cognition is of concern and they're not able to make a formal decision, it is what Hilary said. It's more of a conservatorship at that current point. When we do, or let's just say if a power of attorney is done, it's elected upon the wish of the principal. So let's just say, if that principal is not able to elect who she wants, who she or who they want, and things like that, due to cognition, it's more of having the court, to be involved for conservatorship and things like that. So I would say, we recommend for families that come in without a power of attorney or without an advanced healthcare directive, to start that now, because as mother and father age in place, you don't want to wait until the final moment or until it's needed at the last moment where mother may not feel like discussing it, where maybe about a year ago or 2 years ago she felt like discussing it. So time is of the essence. I would say, even for myself, it really doesn't matter for age. You should always have those documents in place and always update them regularly in relation to if you get married, if you have any family members that do pass, if someone does elect not to be an agent and things like that. So always making sure to update those. But we always tell families, you know, to, if you don't have one, to have a family conversation, see what the wishes are of your loved one, you know, and to formally put those items in place. Because as Hilary and also Dan had said, it comes to a point, let's just say, when people are looking more of asset for greed, or they're looking at what's not in the best interest for the resident. So at that current time, you know, it's to have a trusted person, or to have someone you can really know that will interact your best wishes. So
Yeah, and I would also add, the timing aspect of it. If there's a power of attorney in place, like conceivably, it could, some power of attorneys are immediately active and some are springing. If it's
mhm.
springing, you could conceivably have a doctor's note and have that thing ready to go and provide to banks or a care facility within a week and a half. A conservatorship, you usually get to a point where you needed it yesterday or maybe like a month ago, and now that you acknowledge you need it, it's going to be, weeks, months before you can actually get a court date, sit in front of a judge, and then go through the process. And even then, that there's a temporary process, and it could be limited or it could be a full conservatorship. And it's just more work for everybody involved. The conservatee needs an attorney. The conservator needs an attorney. I mean, those two attorneys are essential in addition to what a family member might request or want. So power of attorney is much more preferable. It's efficient. It's about control. It's also being proactive.
Well, I see that this is where the cost of not planning becomes very real. I mean, families are not only coping with health crisis itself, but they may also be dealing with disagreements and delays and legal issues if proper planning is not put in place. And
Yeah.
And I
um
do want to add, TJ, just to
yeah,
piggyback off Hilary. So it does,
yeah.
you know, we do look at that in relation to when a power of attorney does become gets in effect and things like that. So it could be, let's just say, effective immediately, or it could be effective once someone's cognition does slip. And we'll have some family members sometime, they'll say, oh, I'm power of attorney over my mother, and mother still is able to make a decision. So once again, if mother does, you know, if she's able to make a decision and she does make a decision, we still have to honor her right, whatever that she wants, if she's able to make a decision without any mental incapacity. But we do have families that'll say, oh, I'm the power of attorney, this is what I want, it's what's in the best interest for the resident, or the patient rather. So
Mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, so most people, the question just popped up in my mind now because I know that most people assume that if they choose a family member, everything will naturally work out. But in reality, even with good intentions, those situations can become really complicated. So, Hilary, when someone names a family member to act on their behalf, what can go wrong, and how often do you see those situations break down?
Um, I mean, a lot could go wrong and a lot could go perfect as well. I think first and foremost, everybody nominates a family member because we think that's the thing to do. But in reality, managing someone's estate can become a full-time job. And if I was, let's just say I have a full-time job. I mean, this is my full-time job, but let's say I had a different job and then I'm expected to do a full-time job for somebody else. Like, it's not sustainable for me. Like, I have a
Mm,
family, I have kids, I have extracurricular obligations and things I want to do. And then I also have to take care of another person. That could be a lot of like layers that are there. And so the responsibilities could just be overwhelming. The other thing could be someone might not be qualified. If I'm in my 80s and I've lived a fulfilling life, I've worked, I've saved, I may have very well amassed like a huge estate. My child who maybe didn't go to college or might be experiencing some drug or substance abuse issues is not going to be qualified to manage my large estate. I mean,
mm,
like I need somebody to come in and do a budget for me and make sure that I have enough money to live off of if that's the case and I don't have enough money. Or maybe I have complicated assets. Maybe I have rental properties or I have a small business that I'm running. Not anybody is I would say this, not everybody is qualified to run these types of investments or businesses. And so
mm,
that's another area where it could go wrong. And then there's like disagreements that are going to happen in, disagreements over maybe someone is mismanaging something, or maybe the family member that you've elected is doing what he or she is supposed to do, but there's other individuals that don't understand the legal process and the obligations that the fiduciary has to the client. And so that confusion and misunderstanding results in conflict. And
Mm,
going back to like who am I making decisions for? Am I making it for my best interest, or am I making it in the best interest of the client or the individual? And so these disputes or this confusion, it starts off small and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it could get to a point where someone does something wrong or attorneys are involved, and the first thing that attorneys will recommend is get rid of all the family members and put a neutral person like a fiduciary in there. And
right.
the fiduciary is going to look at everything from an objective point of view. What does the client need before what any of the family members need? Because
Mm,
you can also have a client who's in his or her 80s, 90s, who is also, fully supporting his or her adult children, and that could be like another aspect. So there are so many layers, and every situation is unique and different.
And
wow.
TJ, I'll just say two of the common ones that we see in assisted living would be, like Hilary had said, when a resident has massive asset that needs to be managed, some families are just not equipped, to handle that. So once again, having a professional to ensure that payments are being made on time. Let's just say if they have any tax concerns, just managing that large asset. But also too, let's just say my other let's just say red flag for having family members on the power of attorney would be if they have enough asset, to be able to take care of themselves, but a family member is making a decision. Say, for example, if a resident wants a power wheelchair and they're able to afford it and they want it, and the family member will say, well, no, I don't want that. Why
Mm,
do you not want that when the resident can pay for the chair? They've already expressed the concern. It's not a clinical measure. So what would be the reason why we would hold that request from them if they're able to meet their own personal needs? So I would say those are kind of like the two common: massive asset, and also just the philosophy of the resident, I guess, on their requests, on their wishes. Because people, let's just say, as Hilary had said, you've worked till you're 80 or 90 years old, so you have amassed a fortune. So you're actually at this liberty where, if you want something and you're able to afford it, you can have that. You shouldn't be able to be told no unless it is something like that is a detriment to
mm.
health, things like that. But yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I
Thanks
mean,
for that. Yeah.
yeah, and I would add, the other thing is like when someone gets to a point where he or she needs in-home care, or he or she's transferred into an assisted living facility, the costs that are associated with care are high. I mean, it is what it is, and so people don't just have $1 million of cash sitting in a bank account.
Correct.
Mm,
Oftentimes they're going to have to plan, they're going to have to sell assets, and it's not like you just sell assets and you have the cash available. There's going to be income tax consequences. So it's another layer of like planning and strategizing on top of, is the person being cared for? Am I minimizing tax liabilities by making sure I'm approaching like liquidating assets in the best possible way?
Account
So
right.
liquidation. Mhm.
yeah.
Dan, so what qualities do you think, based on what Hillary and EJ said already, what qualities do you think matters most when choosing someone to make decisions for a loved one? I mean, you're in home care industry. I'm sure you've met, families in this kind of problems before. So, based on your experience, what do you think should be the qualities?
From our perspective, it's pretty much patience, which is because you're going through family members or whatever happens to be, and just persistence. Sometimes people will do a little bit and then you can't get a hold of them for 2 weeks, and then the other part of the party's going, hey, we got to get this done, type of thing. So that's what we see. I mean, by the most part, people understand, they want to do the right thing. There's bad people out there too, and that can happen. But we're blessed. My sister was a nurse, and um, she was smart and could get through it. But there were times when we had to go back and do some revisions to make it work. And it's a team sport.
Yeah, but I don't know. Is it, do I need to, if so, for example, if I need to, assign my POA to someone, must the person be my relative, or can it be somebody else? Must the person be a member of the family?
I'll just say this, TJ, and I'm sorry to interject, but let's just say you're able to elect anyone that you prefer, as your agent. It's whoever you feel more comfortable with, or, to enact your wishes. But a power of attorney, let's just say, and I tell families and residents, if you take a power of attorney document and rip it in half, it's no longer, it's null and void. So You can
Oh.
always change your mind at any time. The only time that you cannot change your mind would be if it's a conservatorship, if it's court appointed, that's locked down. But let's just say if it's something that is witnessed or notarized, if you change your mind tomorrow and say, you know what, I want Dan instead of Hilary, you would just rip your original in half and you would have the new set to be done. And that would be the new acting document. So it just depends on your preference. So, but you always have that right to elect and always to sever it, to amend. You always have that full control. So.
Thanks. Dan, do you want to ask any follow-up question on this one?
Yeah, I have one for EJ. If something does go wrong and you need a fiduciary, what are the signals that would make you make that first call?
Well, let's just say because that we're non-medical and we don't manage finance, let's just say it starts with a business office. So if we have not received a rental payment, our rental invoices are due between the 1st and the 10th. We investigate, and things like that. So say, for example, if the resident is alert, managing their own finances, have not made the payment, let's just say oddly they have the money in the account but have not made the payment due to, oh, I forgot to write the check, I forgot, blah blah blah. We offer these services like that. So we would have a care plan conference, with the resident to alert, well, we've noticed, that there has been a late payment, things like that, and we want you to focus on the fun things. So let's just say the fun things would be, your appetite, your meals, what you're going to do for today. Let someone that's a specialist take care of the heavier things, like paying your invoices, making sure that all of your accounts are in the green. And it normally goes like that. So we provide options, to agencies and things like that. But that's normally my first indicator. My second indicator would be family dynamics. So let's just say if families are alerting us that, hey, well, I'm arguing with my sister, my brother, we're having a hard time, making a payment, or my sister's making this half of this payment, my brother's making this half, we would then refer it to financial fiduciary to then discuss it with them on how would they want to manage their mother's estate or their account and things like that. Because we're non-medical, we don't divulge in that, but leaning them to agencies that can best give their expertise, like Hilary. But I would just say those would be my top two inabilities, to make a payment on time, and then let's just say family dynamics, and also let's just say when the third one kind of would be mental cognition. We don't run a memory care, but let's just say if someone does have a memory deficit or like MCI or just things like that, we would then make recommendations, to refer them to financial fiduciary if they don't have, let's just say, a responsible party in place, or things like that. It's just to ensure that if their cognition were to slip, that someone is still enacting, on their behalf, because they may have bills in the community, things like that. So someone's still ensuring that everything is green. So.
Oh, nice. And Hilary, do you want to add to that? I mean, is there any other situations that usually leads to the need for a fiduciary?
Yeah, just kind of like talking about how, like there's a payment issues and, there's family members. A fiduciary also acts as a conduit between, maybe like a three-way conduit even in this example, but you have the family members or friends, whoever it might be that has an interest in the person, the care facility or care providers, and the client, and it's like, you're helping facilitate payment, and so that the family doesn't have to deal with the mechanics and everything of like making sure that the monthly rent or care services are met. The care manager isn't getting involved in the family dynamics, because if it's siblings, one versus each other, they will oftentimes want to bring other, third parties into their fight because they want someone to advocate for them and understand that I'm the good sibling and this is the bad sibling, and you can't get involved in that. And then you have your patient, and like you don't want your client, I should say, you don't want your client to have to like suffer, and so you want to not isolate him from his family, but isolate him from the problem. Because I would say you have a family member that is fighting, they're still going to bring their parent into it, even if their parent is capacitated or incapacitated. And as the care, part of the care team surrounding that client, you might start to notice that once the children visit and leave, like the client is like not feeling so hot, or the mood changes, and it's like you can see that there's a problem. So putting that on a fiduciary, because that's the fiduciary's job, could add a lot of relief to everybody involved. The fiduciary has to listen to the family, say what they have to say, and if the fiduciary is good at establishing boundaries, then he or she will figure that out. And then everybody else they don't have the distractions, so they can do their job, and the client can enjoy his life. Easy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just to
You
I'll just say TJ as well too. imagine how that resident feels, and we're going to think about the
Yeah.
resident standpoint, having to, fight with, multiple children, or having to be put in the middle of a financial dispute when all their main concern should be, enjoying their golden years and enjoying their families. So once again, having that financial fiduciary, it does, lift the strain off of the resident, because it is a psychosocial effect, when it's just based upon making a financial decision versus, just living life and enjoying a quality of life. So
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is such an important point because sometimes family hear professional fiduciary and assume something has gone wrong. But in many cases, based on what I hear now, it can actually be a wise and protective choice, especially when neutrality and expertise is needed. So I'm so glad that there's a lot of advantages to having a professional fiduciary. Um, and for those for the audience, please, we're getting close to the questions to the question and answer session. So please let your questions keep coming in. Dan, do you want to ask any other question before I move to the question and answer?
Well, I think we covered a lot of it, but the whole goal is don't wait. It could be the biggest challenge you have, and if you wait too long, and Hilary touched base on this as well, and I'm sure it's the same in a facility. Uh, get the right partners in each area, and then it'll be much smoother.
And
Mm,
just to piggyback off of just Hilary and also Dan as well too, it's about accountability and just transparency. If there's any, let's just say, deficit about account ledger, a financial fiduciary is not offended about, oh, why are you asking that? They'll be able to provide that, versus a family member. If you ask them, well, can you provide a breakdown on, how did you spend mother's check? It's a little bit intimate versus, a financial fiduciary
Very much.
lays it out on an Excel spreadsheet, and they're able to say this was moved here, things like that.
Right.
So it's just
I
in the
agree.
best interest
No,
of the
that's
resident.
big.
Yes, and financial misuse, we see it all the time, and that's why I love the fact that we're non-medical, because it is very uh complex when it comes down to managing finance. But you'll see families, they'll move money out of mother's account to their personal account, or they'll do the oddest things, for accounts. And once again, who's responsible for that would be the resident, or the I guess the power of attorney, or the financial fiduciary. So it's just making sure that their rights are being protected and that they're not being abused and things like that financially.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
oh,
mean,
right.
financial elder abuse is a huge thing right now. Like I have multiple cases where there's just a little bit, a lot, depending on the client, and it could be friends, it could be family members, it could be a bad actor. And I
Mm,
think the thing is like that everyone needs to look out for or listen for is the types of questions people ask, or
mm,
if you see the client with somebody and you're like, if it seems odd, it might be odd. I mean, it's hard to get to the point
mm,
where you can start to like pull back the curtains and see what's actually going on, but it is a real thing, and it can happen to anybody. And these bad actors get in there, and you can't just get rid of them. It becomes a process. I mean, maybe you could
mhm.
shoo them away, but then if it's
mm,
if someone is their meal ticket, they're not going to go away easily. Like it's going to
definitely.
take a little bit of effort. And unfortunately, like calling adult protective services, it's nice, but it's not always the solution, and it rarely goes anywhere.
Correct. And
Mm,
imagine, I'll just say Hillary and also Dan and TJ as well too. For a
Yeah.
resident, or for even a person to be financially abused, imagine the toll on them. They've worked their whole entire
Right.
lives, for endowments, for savings, for asset, and to be taken advantage of or manipulated. It's just
Just wrong.
yeah, I just
yeah.
words can't even come to mind.
Yeah.
That's why as advocates, and as mandated reporters, we do everything possible, especially in our setting, to alert residents on those metrics. We do have meetings, with financial fiduciaries that come into community, that they do seminars, to alert residents on the new, I guess, frauds, and kind of like, now people are calling your phones to get your voices and things like that. So just
Mm,
spotting, I guess,
Mhm.
those ways to protect our seniors, because now as a vulnerable population, they're accessible for risk,
Mhm.
and it could be, oh, well, you owe a bill, and our seniors are from the old school style. If I owe something, I'm going to pay it. So once again, it's just a tunnel level issue if they're not able to get the proper assistance. So
Yeah, and
Well,
are they going to pay it with a check that has their account number and their routing number? I mean, you
yep.
could use that number to pull money out of the account into another account, which is what I had seen with one of my other clients. Like I was shocked when I saw the way
Mm.
that this person had pulled money out of an account, because or somebody has limited mobility, it's a lot easier to give someone your debit card and say, go to the
Correct.
bank
Oh,
and
yeah.
get some money for me. So
Correct.
yeah.
We see it
Wow,
every
this is scary.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, but I'm glad, and thanks, Dan, for making us to have this webinar, because I feel that it is really essential for people to know the complexities, in managing their assets, especially as they grow old. And I have a quick question here. I mean, a couple of questions here, and Um, I'll go ahead. I think, well, anyone can react to this. Can the same person handle both medical and financial decisions?
I would.
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
Yes. It depends. So I
Mm,
will say this, one thing that we haven't talked about with fiduciary. So for licensed professional fiduciaries, this is a second or a third career for most of them. And based upon whatever their prior career was or what made that person become a fiduciary, he or she is going to be inclined to certain types of cases. So for example, if you're a fiduciary who worked in the banking industry prior, you're probably going to focus on more just like the asset management. Or I've met fiduciaries who are social workers or home health workers, and so they'd be fiduciaries would be more inclined to do healthcare. I mean,
healthcare.
there are going to be instances where a fiduciary will do both roles. I mean, for myself, I would do either role. I'm more inclined to do the financial, although I do health, but I would do financial and health for someone when I recognize that there's no one else to do that role. But the healthcare role for fiduciary could become a very time consuming job. I mean, if there's not the means to hire a care manager to put in there, it could become a full-time job. And so I'd say in
mm,
general, like a fiduciary would probably take on no more than 2 or 3 cases, because that fiduciary is also, aside from making medical decision, that fiduciary is taking that client to all of his or her doctor's appointments. And
right.
it takes time and scheduling. So yeah.
Well, well,
I agree, Hilary.
well,
Yes, in our setting, let's just say, the power of attorney, let's just say they could be both for, let's just say, financial and for medical. It just depends on the circumstance. It does, we have seen it before where, if a son's an attorney, he's more of the financial one. If the daughter's a nurse, she's more of the medical one. So we kind of like, just deviate on that. But we have seen it where it's the same person as the financial decision maker and also the healthcare decision maker as well too. So financial fiduciary, I guess with us, they don't really take to appointments, but it's more kind of like, like I said, balancing of their ledger. We send them the invoice. They pay the current invoice. I believe there was a situation in our current community where there was a check discrepancy, where there was a check missing, and the fiduciary requested the ledger. She broke it down. She was able to spot, the missing check number. She sent it to us to verify. We verified that we didn't have it in house, so she was able to fax, or I'm sorry, overnight a check to the community. So it's more kind of like on that business acumen, making sure that
right.
everything's in queue, and there is a set amount and things like that. So we'll call the fiduciary and say, hey, there's additional payment. She's like, there's a 6K max, and unfortunately it'll
Mm,
have to be out of the resident's pocket. So we're more kind of like on that. So
well, well, thanks for that. The next question is, when should a family consider a professional fiduciary?
At what point? It depends.
Yes.
depends,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, in the best case scenario, a fiduciary is written into the estate plan. And so what I tell clients who will reach out to me, they'll ask if I want to act as a successor trustee. In oftentimes they have a child and they want to name me as a backup. And I say that's a great thing. If something happens with the kid in the future, life, like stress, a divorce, whatever, having a fiduciary there is ideal. You don't need the fiduciary, but it's a safety measure. It's a backup plan. Um, if you get to the point where a child or somebody is already acting as an agent under a power of attorney for healthcare or financial documents, it could be complicated depending on whether or not that person has capacity, and it might be roll over to a court involvement matter. So like if there's an active power of attorney and the individual who signed the power of attorney no longer has capacity, and like let's say a child is acting as the agent, it's unlikely that the power of attorney is going to let the child nominate a successor. So in that instance, it would go over to the court. Like the
To the
power of
court.
attorney would be canceled, conservatorship implemented. If the client has a trust, which is, allows for someone to manage financial matters, the trust will have a lot more like built-in provisions that will allow for the resignation of a trustee and like the appointment of a successor trustee. So, I mean, in any case, like when a child recognizes that he or she can't handle something,
Mm.
whether it's stress or it's just family obligations or it's conflict, at that point, an attorney has to get involved, and then an attorney can help the family navigate what the next steps are, whether they're amicable or whether they're all fighting. They will usually come together to say, let's just get a fiduciary, and then, enough with the fighting and whatever's holding us up.
Even for our
Mm.
setting, I'll just say TJ as well too.
Right.
They ask me all the time, "Can you be my power of attorney? Can you be my backup?" And unfortunately, because that we work for them, it's the answer is no. Anything I just say my rule of thumb is if anything with an EE trustee, leasing, it's normally a no. So, but we do alert, the same thing that it's always good to have multiple, not saying multiple, but I guess backups in the event if your primary is not able to make a decision, if they have a health condition or if they pass away, you have someone that
Yeah.
can spring into action for those and things like that. So,
Yeah, and
Um,
you just something else I would add is licensed professional fiduciaries carry insurance. So I carry errors and omissions insurance year round. It's to
mm.
protect everybody involved from a mistake if a fiduciary makes one. If it's a court matter where it's a probate, that in that instance someone has already died, or a conservatorship of the estate, the court will require the fiduciary to obtain a bond. So having that fiduciary, I mean, there are other added layers of protection, whether it's insurance, it's a bond. And at the end of it, the fiduciary does have a license and is accountable to the Professional Fiduciary Bureau in the state of California.
Hmm,
All right.
Yeah.
that's great.
Thank.
Customer.
So one more question. Although I have one at the back of my mind, but I will bring that up after this one. So this question is, what if siblings disagree with the person chosen to act? Have you ever seen such situation?
all the time,
Yes.
yes, all the time.
Yeah. I would also add if you're talking about a fiduciary, there might be instances in which children might think that by electing that fiduciary, he or she is going to carry on or fulfill whatever it is that child wanted. So there's going to be disagreement. The fiduciary is not
Mm.
there for the children or to follow the children's direction. The fiduciary is there to make decisions that are based upon the client and remain neutral.
And
So,
remain
the fiduciary is not an advocate for family members at all.
Oh,
Not here to hear your sad story or, what happened between you and your sibling. I'm here to focus on your parent. So,
right.
And same as us in the assisted living setting, because I am a licensed social worker, we do allow them to vent and, and therapeutic presence and socialization. But when it comes down to legalities, it's black and white. Whoever is elected is that person making the decision. But we do tell the resident, if they're able to make a decision and still are sound mind, if you don't want your daughter to be your power of attorney tomorrow, you can tear it up and we can, get it redone, or it can be redone. You can always choose, so it's always alerted that they have the option, to elect at any given time, because that changes. Due to, let's just say, circumstance, things like that, so it's always making sure that they have the ability to choose at any time. So
All right. Thanks. But this is my question. And my question is it's very funny. So it seems all this problem are for rich guys, right?
mm,
Um, how much should be in my account? How many assets should I have? How many assets should I have? Or how many cars should I have to be able to think about, having a fiduciary? You know what I mean?
uh, anybody can benefit from a fiduciary, and there are
Right.
absolutely fiduciaries that have a minimum of like assets under management. Like you have to have $2 million, $5 million, and there are fiduciaries that are like, nope, I will take on a case whether it's $1 million. But in in most instances, the fiduciaries have a minimum amount that he or she is going to charge for services, and that's just to cover costs and overhead
So,
associated with taking on that matter. So I think with proactive planning and finding a fiduciary that's the best fit for the client, there's a fiduciary for every budget. Because even if somebody has a little bit of money, or a lot of money, people are still going to fight over it. I mean, people's concept of money is not realistic. Like someone sees $500,000 and thinks, I'm going to be rich if I can save that and make sure that my parent doesn't like blow through that for his or her care. And for $1 million, it's like, or more, some people are like, well, shoot, I could get an attorney and fight for this. And even after I hire an attorney, I still have enough money coming to me. So
Right.
I mean, everyone should interview a couple of fiduciaries to see who might be a right fit. And there are more experienced fiduciaries who've absolutely set like a case minimum, but there's also newer fiduciaries that are building their practice and more than happy to take on smaller clients. And a lot of it goes to planning and implementing a budget. And I know like things are cyclical, people change, but if you know how much money someone has and you can follow a budget and work with that, you're going to be in a lot better position than somebody who just comes in and is spending money and reacting rather than planning. And so a
Right.
fiduciary should be planning and anticipating everything that's could come that client's way for the future, like whether it's minimal or extreme.
And just to
Right.
piggyback off of Hillary, especially for our setting as well too. Currently our resident that uses a fiduciary, massive asset. So when I mean it's like multi-million, so there is, I guess, a limit. But like she said, there's something for everyone. Let's just say, because at the end of the day, someone will have to manage something, even if it is on a lower level or a higher level. It's just finding that perfect fit. But usually when someone comes in with a fiduciary, that they're coming in with a massive asset that needs to be managed and things like that. So power of attorney,
Right.
POA, it's more kind of like, of a regular, if you're a regular person, and just have, marginal asset. But if you're looking for that high attention to detail, it's more fiduciary. So
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. So as we close, I'd like to ask each of our guests for one final takeaway. So for a family listening today, I want EJ, Dan, and Hilary to react to this. So what is one action step you would encourage them to take sooner rather than later?
well, I would just say for me, it'd be, to encourage families, to look at options, as a licensed social worker and someone who looks at community advocacy, it's just good to know what your options are, and to work those best resources and to put those wishes in place before it is too late. It's better to be proactive than reactive. And that's why I say, even for my notary career, I do all of my services free of charge, because I believe in that advocacy, being able to get to the
Mm,
bedside to ensure that wishes are being met. So if anybody would need any of those services, please give me a call. We'll come to you, and we'll make sure that those are being done. So, but just being able to help people in general, and let's just say, timing. Once again, just knowing that it's better just to get it now than to get it later. So,
right. Awesome. Thanks. Dan?
No, for me, it's hitting it as early as you can. We see people come in and they've got money, but they've also got health issues, and we try to do our best to get them to, one, come to the table as a family, and then two, get the right help, because it's pretty daunting when you put emotion and money together. It makes for a tough call. So I
Mm,
appreciate both of our speakers today, because they've not only done it and have experience in it, but they're willing to help others. And so
right.
thank you very much, Hilary and EJ. I mean, that's what makes a good world.
All right. Hilary, any final
Uh,
call?
I say my biggest takeaway is being proactive, especially with estate planning. It takes a few hours to, meet with attorney, agree on what you want for your estate planning documents, and put a plan in place.
Mm,
It's a few $1,000s up front, but it's not something that an estate plan is not necessarily something that needs to be maintained on an annual or every other year basis, and it could do a lot of good and avoid a lot of conflict and provide clarity. And so I would encourage everyone to be proactive, meet with an estate planning attorney. Usually initial consultations with an estate planning attorney are free, and then it's a flat fee. So there's no billing. I mean, there are attorneys who bill hourly, but it's upfront. You get all that information and you know what you're getting yourself into. And also, once you have that relationship with an estate planning attorney and you want to make a change to your documents, you can call him or her. And because
mm,
you have that relationship, it's going to be a lot faster process to sign a new power of attorney if you need to, or
right.
remove somebody or update your healthcare documents.
Right. Thanks so much. And thank you. What I hope families are taking away from this conversation is that, they don't wait for a crisis. they choose decision makers carefully. I mean, carefully, and understand the responsibilities involved and put the right plans in place before they urgently need it. Um, Planning ahead is one of the most practical and loving things a family can do. I say this all the time. Everyone have to just make sure they plan. Anything can happen at any time. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, my co-host Dan Williams, and to our guest Hilary and EJ for sharing your wisdom with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope this conversation has given you clarity, confidence, and practical next steps. Thank you again. I will look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
Thank you,
Right.
guys.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
All
everybody.
right. Bye bye.